Ever wondered how cocoa beans turns into chocolate? It's all about fermentation and curing. First, fermentation happens right after the cocoa pods are opened. It starts within 24 till 48 hours and lasts around 4 to 7 days for most beans like Forastero or just 1 to 3 days for Criollo beans. The cool part is the beans themselves don't ferment. It's actually the pulp around the beans. Microorganisms get to work breaking down the sticky pulp. This step also starts the process of developing chocolate flavor precursors. Without fermentation, we wouldn't get that delicious chocolate taste. Here's a quick comparison. Fermentation happens in the pulp and done by microorganisms, while curing happens inside the beans and use enzyme. Fermentation removes the pulp, while curing creates the signature chocolate flavor and brown color.
Now explain the microbial aspects of fermentation. Microorganisms are responsible for the breakdown of the pulp that surrounds the bean. Their activities result in the death of the beans and they create the environment that enables the formation of cacao flavor precursor. Pulp is an excellent medium for the growth of microorganisms since it contains 10 to 15% of sugars. When the beans are removed from the pods, pulp is inoculated naturally with a variety of microorganisms from the environment. We will now explain the fermentation method used to ferment our beans. The first method is heat method. Second method is box tray method, and lastly, the basket method. The first fermentation method is the heat method. The heat method involves placing freshly harvested cacao beans, still encased in their pulp, into large piles or heaps to ferment. The beans are typically covered with leaf to retain heat and moisture. Over several days, usually 5 to 7 days, natural microbes break down the sugars in the pulp, generating heat and developing the bean's flavor. The heap is occasionally turned to ensure even fermentation. After fermentation, the beans are dry. I will now pass to my good friend Shazwan to explain further.
Thank you, Izzat. Now, we go to the second method, which is box tray method. It uses wooden trays, which allow for proper drainage. This setup accelerates the fermentation process, completing it in approximately 4 days. It's a more controlled method, ideal for medium to large scale operations. And lastly, basket method. In the basket method, wooden baskets with holes at the bottom are used. This design facilitates drainage and airflow, essential for proper fermentation. The process takes between 3 to 5 days, depending on the weather and other conditions. Across all methods, the fermentation process generally takes 5 to 7 days. The exact duration depends heavily on the weather conditions, as temperature and humidity play a significant role in fermentation efficiency. To determine if fermentation is complete, we look for two key indicators. First, the external mucilage changes color, turning milky chocolate brown. Second, when squeezed, the bean should release a brown and purple liquid. During fermentation, several critical chemical changes occur. First, alcohol production, which is yeast, act on the sugars in the beans, producing alcohol. And second, acetic acid formation, which is bacteria, convert the alcohol into acetic acid. These changes are essential for developing the characteristic flavors and aromas of the final product. Once fermentation is complete, the beans must be dried. These steps stabilize the beans, halting microbial activity and preparing them for storage or further processing.
We move to the importance of fermentation and curing. We know there is no chocolate flavor in cocoa bean without fermentation. Chocolate flavor precursors are formed during fermentation which help in further flavor development. You can see the sensory attribute by the picture beside this text. Importance of fermentation and curing. There are three important. First, helps in separation of pulps and beans. Second, omission of fermentation prevents the possibility of ever developing a true chocolate flavor, and defect cannot be removed by later attempts of fermentation. Third, With lower temperature, the putrefaction bacteria will start to proliferate, and longer fermentation would cause hammy of flavor typical for over-fermented cocoa beans. Next, we move to the next presenter.
Alright, next up we're going to moving to factors that affecting the fermentation of cocoa. We've got extent of ripeness of pod, quantity of beans, quantity of pulps, type of cocoa, duration of fermentation, turning, seasonal or climatic effect, pot diseases and pot storage. Alright, for the first one, extent of ripeness of pod. Overripe or underripe pods can affect the quality of fermentation. And for the second one, quantity of beans. A sufficient and balanced quantity of beans ensures uniform fermentation. Overcrowding may lead to uneven fermentation. And as for quantity of pulp, the pulp provides the necessary sugars for microbial activity. And for the type of cocoa, different cocoa varieties, for example, Criollo, Forastero, Trinidad Trio, require specific fermentation. For the pod storage, prolonged storage before fermentation can affect bean quality. Timely processing after harvest is critical. For the pod diseases, infected or diseased pods can introduce unwanted microorganisms affecting fermentation quality. For the seasonal or climatic effect, temperature, humidity, and rainfall impact fermentation efficiency. And the normal fermentation, proper fermentation techniques, for example, duration or method, are vital for flavor development. And for the turning, regular turning aerates the bean and ensures uniform fermentation.